Well, hello, my fellow violets that I cannot see, hear, or know if you're here, but I'm so happy that you're here. My name is Sam Rader. I went to Marlboro in the 90s. I was class of 97. And at graduation, I won the Joy of Music Award, which was really, really fun. And I wanted to share with you guys a new system of growth and self-discovery and evolution that I've created, which I call source code. So my story is that after Marlboro, I went to Vassar College in the East Coast, and I double majored there in cognitive science, which is like artificial intelligence, robotics, neuroscience. And then I also majored in Eastern religion, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism. So I essentially studied consciousness from the East and the West, and it was heaven. Like I learned so much there, and Vassar was such a beautiful place for me, held me so well. And then from there, I went on to earn my PhD in psychology, and I became a licensed clinical psychologist and had a private practice for many years. I saw clients, starting in practicums and then internships and then in private practice. I sat with clients for 18 years. And I started sort of developing my own approach, and I call it source code. And the more I worked with it, the more I realized it's really not psychology because it's not about the mind. And so I have moved on from the field of psychology and just stick with source code. And I've been teaching tons of coaches and therapists for many, many years to work in the source code modality. And the reason that I left psychology behind is that I noticed I would sit with clients for years, every single week, to have just shifts come after such a long time. It would really take me, at my best, a year and a half, almost never that. At my worst, 10 years to really have someone after week finally have that shift where their whole life completely changes and their sense of self. And they're like, whoa, I'm in a new world. And now with source code, that's actually happening in minutes. And I know that sounds bonkers. And how could I even make a claim like this when you're on the outside looking and hearing about source code until you experience it yourself? It sounds like a crazy claim, but it's actually a skill that I've honed and perfected until now. It's something we can really have those shifts in the now. They don't take forever. It's not mind-based. It's in the body. It's in the energy, the thing that passes between people. It's relational. And it's really about shifting our embodiment, which is, I know it's a buzzword these days. And what that really means is if we're embodied as someone stuck or in pain, we're going to keep attracting and recreating that kind of pain. And if we're embodied as someone open and regal and ready for love, we're going to keep attracting that. So what we do in source code is we shift the symbolic layer of reality, because I believe that in our first 5 years of life, our early experience writes a code within us that sort of becomes the algorithm that runs our matrix. That coding determines how the rest of our stories unfold. It's how we see ourselves. It's how we relate with others. It's what we attract and create in this world. It's whatever's a fit, that puzzle piece fit for who we are. So what I do is I go in and I help people rewrite their code. And we're going to be doing a little bit of that today, you guys. So I discovered that the reason that I created my own system is that when I was sitting with clients for 18 years, I noticed that every single human I worked with, regardless of their age, their gender, their socioeconomic status, their sexual preference, how they vote, all of them were talking about the same 12 problems. And I came to understand that we really only have 12 issues as human beings. The DSM cuts it into hundreds of different diagnoses, but in my experience, those diagnoses are actually just iterations of these 12 problems. And some of them are combinations of the problems, and some of them are just a one-to-one, oh, it's this problem. But what I've discovered is, these people across all subsects of society were using actually the same key words to describe these same 12 problems. And I call these problems our coping styles. So what I discovered when I was working with people is that everyone who had this one particular coping style all had the same similar thing going on in early childhood. So each of the coping styles are a reaction to a certain subtle developmental need in our first 5 years of life not being exactly met. So when our need doesn't get met, we have to adapt. And we do that by adopting a coping style, which is really a childhood defense mechanism. And then that defense mechanism stays with us our entire lives. And it's kind of like living inside an invisible prison, but we're not even aware that we're in it because we just think, oh, it's my personality. I'm just shy, or I'm just dominating, or I'm just the one who never gets what I want. And these things feel like us, but they're not who we really are. And source code is aimed at figuring out which ones we have. And by the way, all of us have several coping styles. I had all 12, which is sort of what allowed me to be the conduit for the work. Unlike astrology or the Enneagram, it's not just one. We can have many of them, but all of them are shiftable and healable in the now. And what I find is when we dissolve these brittle defense mechanisms, these things that we thought were us, but they're not who we really are, under that is our true essence, which is love. It's just love. That's another reason I decided to leave the field of psychology behind, was that I found that in that clinical world, love is seen as a sort of 4-letter word. It's seen as risky, damaging. And I believe that love is the most healing function we have. So source code is rooted in love. It's rooted in the compassionate, loving understanding of why we are the way we are. So through the lens of source code, everybody's behavior that bothers us will no longer kind of bother us, because we'll realize, oh, they're doing this because they weren't held as a newborn, or they're doing this because they weren't allowed to have a separate sense of self as a toddler. Once we start to know the map of the wounds that happen at these developmental stages and why they end up showing up the way they do as adults, it can give us so much compassion for ourselves and for others. And it allows us to hold ourselves and others in a new way that allows the true self in ourselves and others to emerge, so we don't have to keep playing out these negative patterns. Source code is kind of the way to stay, the buck stops with me, and put an end to the unconscious generational pain that's been handed down through the millennia. Our parents' coping styles created our coping styles. Either we became a copy of them, or we developed a coping style that's sort of the puzzle piece that fits with theirs. And then we put these coping styles into our kids, and it's all happening unconsciously. And it's not because anyone's bad. All of this is happening innocently, but mostly because as parents, we're usually not aware of the subtle developmental stages of a child in the first 5 years of life. And even if we might be aware, our own coping styles sometimes prevent us from being able to give that unconditional love that we need at each of these stages. So, let's see. Let me take any questions there. I'm still allowed to take questions, right, Natalie?
Yes, there's a Q&A box, so attendees can drop their question into the Q&A box.
Awesome. So I'm getting a picture ready to also share with you guys. And would I see that in the chat, the Q&A box?
No, it'll.
Oh, it says Q&A.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to share with you this. It says that host disabled screen sharing.
Oh, let me fix that.
No problem. Anyone's welcome to ask anything you want as I'm getting this screen set up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a picture of, here we go, the 12 coping styles in these yummy colors. I call these things my ice cream cones, even though there's no cones, but they're so creamy. I just want to eat them. But these are the 12 coping styles. We all have several of them. And if you want to know more, I'll put a slide at the end that has my website so you can check out. And on my website, you'll see the same image, and you can click on each one to reveal more, explaining more about it. And each of the coping styles actually has an antidote or healed position. So disconnected becomes connected, symbiotic becomes solid, provocative becomes clear, frictive becomes spacious. So It's sort of like a little map of how to get where we want to go if we're feeling out of alignment. But the coping style that I want to talk to you guys today about is called premature. And the reason I chose this coping style is I imagine as a Marlboro girl, you probably have a dose of the premature coping style. We mostly all do. And the premature people are my favorite people in the world. It's a coping style about really being an overachiever and an overgiver and someone who's very loving and very like an eager beaver, someone who's kind of just wanting to give and do and be involved and be a functioning part of society. So that's why I wanted to choose it to share with you guys today. So when we have the premature coping style, this style forms as a toddler. So as I mentioned before, these wounds are in the first 5 years of life. Some are newborn, some are infant, some are toddler, some are post-toddler, and some are what I call Oedipal, which is around 5 years old when we're developing our sexual, sensual, competitive, libidinal selves. But as a toddler, kind of what we're trying to figure out is, can I have me and have you? So before toddlerhood, as infants, we're just little completely dependent lumps of flesh. We are nothing but need, and we're attached to our parents in an important way of like, we're just completely dependent on them. But as we begin to toddle, we can try things on our own for the first time. We can toddle away from the safe base of our caregivers and find our own independence and starting to play with this sense of bigness. Toddlerhood is an in-between time, in between babyhood and big kid. And the funny thing about toddlerhood is at that time, we're both a baby and a big kid. As many of you know, toddlers don't even have all their teeth. Sometimes they're still breastfeeding. We're still very much babies at that time. And we're starting to play with our sense of bigness. So what we need during that stage of development, and it's not always clear to parents what we need, but what we need is for them to fully accept and support our bigness and fully accept and support our smallness. So when we toddle away and want to try something on our own, we want them to be like, yes, you're so strong, you're so big, you're doing it, yes. And when we drop something or get scared and we want to run back and be held and breastfed, either literally or metaphorically, just fed and loved and held. And, oh, you're my baby, you're my baby. We need that too. We need to be able to be the baby and be experimenting with big kids. If we have the premature coping style, for whatever reason, during toddlerhood, we were not allowed to need and stay dependent. With that baby part of us, the small part of us was not encouraged. It's like as soon as we started to walk and talk and do things on our own for the first time, that got confused as a sort of faux maturity. And maybe we were praised for our bigness or precociousness, for our ability to take care of ourselves. And oftentimes, if we're premature, we had to take care of someone else. Either maybe we had a parent who needed our caretaking, and or oftentimes if we're premature, we had a younger sibling born at that time when we're 1.5, 2 years old. And hopefully you'll start to be like, oh, this is familiar, this happened. But if we have a sibling born when we're still in that in-between phase, when we're still really a baby, but it's like, no, this is the baby. You're now the big brother or big sister. Oh, I have to be big. I don't get to be small. So the only parts of me that feel valuable are the parts that are big and the parts that can give. And it feels like the part inside that's young and small and needs is bad. And so our hunger comes to feel bad, our emotional hunger. So it can get concretized in literal hunger. It often does. But there's something about our need to feed, our need to be held, our need to be soothed, our need to be that baby that ends up feeling bad inside because our hunger is met with not feeding. And so when hunger is met with not feeding, it feels like a bad part of the self. And it feels bottomless. So it feels like a never-ending hunger because it wasn't ever paired with feeding. So what happens if we're premature is we grow up to be the overgivers, the overachievers. We're the ones always planning, doing, nurturing everyone else. But we feel very embarrassed of our own need. We're usually very worried that we'll be too much for others or a burden for others. So we never want to ask for our needs to get met. And we always put ourselves last on the list. So when we do this, we don't get filled up and we end up getting depleted, and we can even like collapse into a really depleted state when we're premature. And the antidote to premature is to be nourished, to finally allow some of the goodness we so generously give to be given to us, and to receive it and to let it in and to let it nourish us. Now, often part of the premature wound is eating disorder stuff, because our feeling that our hunger is bad and that we shouldn't need and shouldn't feed often gets concretized in food. Like, I shouldn't need food. And so we withhold food from ourselves and think that we're good if we don't eat. And when we're afraid we might be too much for others or a burden, that can concretize in our sense of our body of, oh, I think there's too much of me here. I guess I must be fat. And maybe if there was less of me here, I wouldn't be too much, and then I could be loved. Sorry, my cat's having a moment with this. So we're always trying to be thinner and thinner so that there's less of me here so that I can be loved. And this means it's often withholding food from ourselves, which makes us anorexic. And then, some of us can withstand that anorexia. And then some of us withhold, and then binge. And so either becoming an overeater and binging, or binging and purging and becoming bulimic. So the premature coping style is at the core of eating disorders. And the solution is for us to know that it's okay to need and to feed. I've had so many premature clients come to me who are overweight and say to me, you have to help me stop eating. I'm eating too much. And what I always say to them is, actually, you're not eating enough, because what happens is there's this feeling I shouldn't eat. And so they're not eating 3 high-calorie, satisfying meals a day. And instead, they're hungry all day. So they're continually grazing all day, snacking, grazing. And then at the end of the day, there's usually a binge because there's just this hunger that never got met. So really, coming out of premature is learning that it's okay to need, and it's okay to feed. It's okay to have a problem and need help with it. It's okay to need a hug. It's okay to rest. It's okay to eat 3 satisfying high-calorie meals a day. It's really okay for things to go in. So what I want to do with you guys right now, if you're hopefully many of you are identifying with this. And again, if any of you have any questions whatsoever, please type them in the Q&A. I would love to answer your questions and to be with you in that way. But hopefully you're resonating with this. And what I'd like to do is lead you through an embodiment practice. You know how I told you source code is about shifting the body and not the mind? So what we're going to try right now is a little bit of a guided meditation. So everybody just settle in. Close your eyes, take a deep breath. And just notice your body sinking into the chair. And I just want us to play with some energy. When we're premature, the flow of energy that feels really familiar is energy going out. So I want you to notice all the vectors or lines of energy, all the arrows of energy pointing out. And this is giving, this is doing. And I want you to think about all the places in your life that you nourish and give to. Maybe it's the people you love, your family, causes and things you care about, maybe things you volunteer for, things in your career. And I want you to just feel that line of energy that flows out when you give. And you're such a good giver. And the thing about giving, when that love flows out from you to the world, is that it actually feels really good. It really does feel good to give. So just feel that natural good feeling of the energy flowing out. And how I imagine that feels familiar. Feels like home to really have the energy go out. And now I want you to imagine that we reverse the poles of the arrows and they can start to go in. So I want you to see the people you love in your life feeding you with their love. The organizations and institutions you're a part of pouring into you instead of you always pouring into them. Just see what happens if these lines of energy start to come toward you, and allow them to come into your mouth. Actually, that's how we feed. It's through the mouth. And just see if you can taste that energy on the tip of your tongue. That sweetness of being loved and nurtured from the outside. You're allowed to have stuff go in. Really taste it. And when you're ready, swallow. And allow some of that love from the outside to get inside. And really track it going down, 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 down the esophagus. Seeing what happens when you receive some of the love of the universe and let it get all the way down to your belly. Your stomach is situated just below your ribs on the left side of your body, and see if you can put your hands there. And just feel your stomach being filled up with the love and care and nourishment that you so readily give. And we're just seeing what it feels like if you can finally receive what you so readily give. Really letting it go in and fill you up. Maybe there's a warm feeling inside. A feeling of being full or satiated. If you're still hungry, keep sucking it in. Keep drinking it in. And don't stop drinking it in until you feel full. And that's one of the biggest ways to emerge from the premature coping style is we eat until full. We feed until full, both with literal food, but also with love from the people in our lives. We don't stop taking in until we feel good and full. So that idea, if we're premature, that we're a bottomless pit of hunger is actually a complete misunderstanding. We can absolutely get to full. And when we feel full, that nourishes us. And we stay full for a while. And then, of course, we get hungry again, which means we need to eat again, literally or metaphorically. So I want you guys to just play with these energetics right now of what it would feel like to move from being premature to being nourished. And I want you to imagine what might be different for you in your life if you learn to open your openings and allow some of that goodness to get inside and to nourish and satisfy. What could be different for you in your body? Could be different in your career. What could be different in your home life? What could be different in your relationships? So really just feeling this new embodiment and this new possibility of a new world. And this is the thing with source code is we don't shift the mind and we don't shift the behavior. We shift the coding. The coding to premature is things don't get to go in. And the coding to nourished is things do get to come in and nourish us as this code shifts, our entire lives shift to meet us in that new story. That's the magic of source code. So I'm open to taking your questions. I would love to hear from you. How did that land? How did that feel in your bodies? Can you imagine how the world might show up a little differently for you from this new nourished embodiment? And I'm really here to feed you. I know there's a few of us here. If anybody has any questions for me, this is the time. I'm here to feed you. That's what I've shown up for. Well, I'm going to start to wrap up and just let you guys know that what I do with source code is there's many ways to get fed by source code. We have one-on-one work. I've got a team of incredible therapists and coaches who have been trained to do source code one-on-one work. Unlike therapy and coaching, it's quick and it gets to the root. And so we don't need more than usually one session, or maybe we can do more, but it's not something that goes on and on forever. And it gets to the root problem under the content. So we won't be talking about what happens in your day or the relationships you have. We'll be hearing a few sentences about a presenting problem, and then we'll dive under the surface of things to address the symbolic coding underneath that specific story that's been running you. And we shift at the level of the code. And when we shift the code, reality shifts. Everything shifts. The way we feel shifts. So there's one-on-one coding. I also have digital courses. I have live Zoom courses. So if anybody wants to be a part of this world, I've got a course starting for parents called Parenting is Love, May 25th. I'm really happy you guys were here. And let me just show you my website in case you're curious. Let me share my screen. Share my screen. Did you guys know if you press the green button, it becomes the whole screen? How cool is that? So that's my website. Rader is spelled with no I and an E at the end. drsamrader.com. Come on in. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to receive your emails or DMs. Follow me on Instagram. I'm excited to be a part of the Violet community. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sam. This was amazing. And I'm excited to share this with the rest of the community on our website and on our YouTube channel. And yeah, I'm excited to learn more. I think this is such an incredibly impactful approach, and I'm grateful for you for sharing this with the Marlborough community. And thank you so much for your time. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much, Natalie. It was an honor.
Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.